Baldur Gate 3 is a great game you should play. If you have not played the game yet, it deserves all the praise it gets and awards. This game was made by a company that cares and has an artistic vision about making good games. When I played the game, I felt something I have not done for a long time. It is that this game has a soul, which is about making a game rather than about the money. The amount of possibilities you can play the game is huge. Playing the game for the first time is an unforgettable experience.
To live like you, I could learn to be ugly.
So Baldur Gate 3 is a masterpiece, but a flawed masterpiece. Because the more I play the game, the more I notice things that could have been changed and improved in my opinion. My criticism for this game is because of how much I like this game and for Larian to prove themselves even more in the future. Something I also want to quickly mention is that I do not have any knowledge of how to make games, and I'm quite certain that Larian knows much more than me, which is just a random person on the internet. So this is just a view from a guy that has played a lot of games since his childhood and what I believe and think could have made the game even more fun. And for those that are watching this video, I would also like to hear what bothered you when playing Baldur Gate 3, and we can have a discussion on the YouTube comments. Just don't make it into a Twitter shithole. You may know, or at least be very likely familiar with this term if you have played a lot of RPG games. But for those that don't know, it is a boss that takes it to the extreme, that challenges you to the hardest limit of the game. These kind of bosses are even a challenge for the most experienced players. Example of these bosses are Penance and Wise from Final Fantasy, Sans from Undertale, and Melania Elden Ring. These types of bosses are usually quite secret and hard to find and aren't part of the main story, but it may still do some kind of alteration of the main story. They are not expected as a player to be found in your first playthrough and usually require you to follow specific requirements to be found. And Baldur Gate 3 do not have any super bosses. Well, maybe except one, Grim from Act 1. This boss is the closest to a super boss in Baldur Gate 3. It is quite secretive and difficult. It has many resistances and is only weak to one thing, which is bludgeoning damage, and can only take damage when it is superheated. This means the player has to play in a specific way, which dramatically changes your playstyle to adapt to defeat this boss. In my opinion, Grim is the hardest boss in all of Baldur Gate 3. No boss in the entire game is close to being this difficult. Almost every boss in Baldur Gate 3 you can play however you want, but Grim punishes the player if you do not play the way you are supposed to. If you want a challenge, fight Grim without any bludgeoning damage and including the forge armor, you will then truly go forth fighting the hardest boss in the game. If you have played Baldur Gate 3 more than 2 playthroughs and you're like on your 3rd playthrough, you kinda quickly find out how easy the game is. Even in auto mode, if you just simply know how the game works, you will probably finish the game just fine, so long you don't do anything reckless. And I of course have to clarify, I do not ask for Baldur Gate 3 or Larian future games to be harder. If the game is too hard, it would discourage casual players from buying, which usually is a huge player base. But I am speaking more about those that want a hard challenge, which usually require you to have the best equipment, items and armor to defeat them, and that they will counter whatever cheesy strategy you try to use or even blast it back at you as for karma. These are the bosses that will take many attempts before you defeat them and make you rage and scream at the game. It requires you to learn from your mistakes and be patient until you can master it perfectly. And I think it is unfortunate that Baldur Gate 3 doesn't have any super bosses, and it's a shame too. For those that have mastered the game will not have anything challenging to look forward to. Of course, you can restrict yourself playing solo or doing some funny challenge, but these super bosses are usually there to show you how powerful you have become and make you proud of what you have accomplished. An example of a good candidate for a super boss in Baldur Gate 3 is the Dark Urge. He is probably even the best candidate in the context of the story of Baldur Gate 3. For those that know the Dark Urge story in the game, of what he's done, what he is and what he is made of, it would make sense of what the Dark Urge would be capable of. By the way, major spoiler warning, click on this timeline if you don't want to hear it, and I really recommend you play the game first before listening to this part. Anyway, imagine the story going normally as you enter Orin and take a netherstone in the game, but instead of Dark Urge being found dead, unless you're playing as the Dark Urge of course, he simply just wasn't there instead, and you can finish the game normally as you could. But what about instead if you do some extra searching and puzzling around the Balls temple, you could eventually find the Dark Urge as a hidden antagonist, which he will fight much stronger than any main story boss you have fought before. You may ask, why the Dark Urge? Why not any other character or ball spawn? That is because the Dark Urge is literally created from balls on divine blood, compared to others which had some kind of unnamed mortal mother. In the story of Baldur's Gate 3, he is even so respected and liked by his own master that is literally his favorite child. So fight him should be hard, because Baldur, his favorite child and his own creation being threatened, it would make sense here he would grant the Dark Urge much more powers than just the Slayer form, which you would basically fight the closest to the god of murder as you possibly could. It would be such a cool and unique boss fight. What I think of Larian did to the Dark Urge was a good unique concept. I just think there was a big wasted opportunity here. Just imagine the plot twist you would experience if done well. It could have been remembered and talked about years. This is of course just one example of a super boss. I could go on to mention another example, but I think I have talked enough about this to get to my point. So let's move on to the next topic. When I go around playing, it kinda gets quite boring when you know where you have to go and get the stuff you want for your build. It just becomes like, why should I go to this location when I know it has the worst loot in the game? There will literally be no reason for me to explore there. And at the same time, there are locations which have so good rewards that it would be foolish for me to ignore it. I think you already see the problem here. The loot in Baldur's Gate 3 have no randomness. All items that are uncommon to legendary have a predetermined location which you have to go to get the thing you want. I do not have a problem with this, but I think it would be more enjoyable if you could have a chance finding something unique you may only find in one playthrough. Divinity Original Sin 2 have this. It isn't perfect, but it is there, which in that game you could find both the predetermined loot that was classified as unique and the random loot as uncommon to the entire way to divine. With this randomness, it could give players a reason to explore more than they usually do, since they will know the predetermined loot is bad, but they might get something good because of the randomness. In the early game in Act 1, you may find a great sword as an example that has an advantage against goblins as a modifier, and that would be a great weapon in the early game. It would make you feel excited to use it, since in the early game there are a lot of goblins, and if you get it afterwards, which basically makes it useless when goblins aren't a thing anymore, well, bad luck then. Or you may find a rapier that gives you Eldritch Blast as a cantrip, not something that is strong, but still a funny thing to get. If I could say when you get these random drops, I can say it like this. In Act 1 you may find uncommon and if lucky rare items. In Act 2 you will start finding more rare items, but if lucky you may also find very rare loot. And in Act 3 you can already guess that you may be very lucky and find legendary stuff. Why I think this will improve the game is because if you like to play as a barbarian as an example, it is your favorite class and have it a bit hard to play anything else, then it can quickly get quite boring, since you have to go for the almost exact same equipment over and over again. But if you then add randomized equipment, then that doesn't have to be the case, because every playthrough you do will be quite different from your last, and not relying on the same armor and weapons over and over again. You might actually get something better than the predetermined treasure in the game. We all know the best great sword in the game is the Baldur Giant Slayer, and the best monkey gloves are the gloves of soul catching. Both of these are really powerful weapons. It would be interesting if you have a very small chance to get something equally as strong as these, or even better that is different in a way. The chance should be small, but it should indeed be a possibility. So I just want to quickly conclude that it would be a good thing for the game. I think what the Divinity Original Sin 2 did with both having predetermined and randomly generated loot was the best thing, and I hope they continue with that in the future. Of course, you are free to disagree and you may not even like it. When I got to my 4th game, I started to get bored of these items and pretty much used the same equipment over and over again, since there was nothing that competed with it really, and I just wished there was something more I never saw before. This one is quite self-explanatory, but why did Larian think it was a good idea to introduce companions in Act 2 and 3? Because I was already so deep in the game already that I didn't care about these optional characters, especially Minsk. He's way too late to be introduced in the game. At that point you were probably level 12 and already defeated most of the major bosses. I'm just not going to change my party members when I have already immersed myself with the party I'm going for. It doesn't matter how good written these characters are, people are just not going to play them, and those that do want them in the party will be annoyed since they are introduced so late in the game. I have played with Minthara in my evil playthrough since she's the only truly evil companion in the game, so of course I have to, although I'm never going to see myself have Minsk in the party. Maybe when I have played for thousands of hours, which I very likely never going to do. But come on, in Divinity Original Sin 2, all the companions were introduced in Act 1 and could pick the ones you wanted to play with quickly. So please do not do this again, Larian. Instead you could have spent more time and money on other things. This was just a waste of time and resources that could have gone to something else, like more side quests or improve the Act 1 companions even more. And before anyone takes it wrong, no, I do not dislike these characters. I think they are well written like everyone else, but I think this was a bad idea to introduce them so late to begin with, and all of them should have been available in Act 1. Like, wasn't there anyone in the game studio that questioned like, hey, maybe we shouldn't add companions when the players have already completed like 50% of the game? Anyway, I think the decision they made here were a bit weird. I will commend Larian that there's an obvious evil and good path in the game. Many games don't give you the opportunity to do that, and some games aren't that evil even if you try to be. Like in Baldur 3, you can pretend to be good and later betray that person in one of the evilest way possible. That is very interesting, and different scenarios they have thought which path you want to go. Many games don't do that. The game, although has quite linear storyline, but you can alter that storyline in the end and show you the impact you did in the end. But being evil in Baldur 3 is not worth it, well, mostly of the time. There are two evil things you can do in Baldur 3 that's just straight up a bad idea you should never do, which locks you out from a lot of content rewards and gets almost nothing in return. Again, I go to spoiler territory again, so you have been warned. Raid the Grove and end Isabel or capture Isabel. It is one of the worst choices you can make in the game. Not from an evil standpoint, but a game mechanical one. And I think most of you here agree with this. Raid the Grove, you end Emerald Grove's existence, which both betray the tieflings and the druids and side with the goblins. Sounds like an interesting route until you find out immediately lose 3 companions that don't want to be with you anymore and need to convince Gale to stay to not lose him too. Which makes sense of course since they are good characters, but you lose so many potential side quests, allies, rewards for doing this. So what do you get for doing all of this? 1 Mind Flayer Tadpole. Yep, you heard me right. Just 1. And also supposed to get Minthara as a companion until people found out an exploit you to just knock her out, which just made the entire thing even more useless. That was patched later and that was no longer the case, but it was really unpopular, so Larian reverted it back. So in the end you don't get any new different content and quests and no unique awards, except the only thing you can do is to boing Minthara. So I do not recommend you do this even in an evil playthrough, because you can do it later anyway, which I will of course mention in the next part. So the only reason you want to do this is either you want to roleplay as a mass murderer, or you for some reason love Minthara so much that you're literally obsessed with her. So in Act 2 you get another chance to do it again in Last Night In, and the tieflings will be there if you save the grove, which I recommend. This is also a bad idea, but this one is much more manageable since you can plan when you want to do it, and you do not lose companions and can do call as personal quest and also Halcyon to get him as official companion. But before you decide to destroy the Last Inn, whatever you do not speak with Isabel. If you must be ready for a fight, you must win. If you lose, Last Night In will collapse. She is then either captured or killed. Do all the side quests and get all the rewards, so when you're done with it, end her or capture her, but I recommend you rather end her. And I also recommend that you later let Shadow spear Dame Aelan, since there's not much of a point to keep her alive anyway. Shadow then becomes a Dark Sister to continue her path as a Sharon, and she gets unique abilities and equipments. This is better than raiding the Grove, but the rewards are still lackluster compared to what you get in Act 3 when you later meet them again. then. There's also one which is the opposite than Act 3, which being evil is better than the good. That is when you do the murder tribunal, which you end Valeria and becomes an unholy assassin. Then you get a ghost merchant called Abyssigal. He will sell very good stuff. The standout one is the ballast armor, which give your enemies piercing vulnerability. Saving Valeria here will do nothing for you, except you will get some allies in the final fight, which doesn't do that much, but this is also wrong. I want the good and evil in this to have a balance. I want both sides to have an appeal which is unique from each other and experience the game in different ways. I'm not saying that both need to be equally balanced, and I think that is hard to pull off, but Baldur's Gate 3 obviously favors the good side here. The rewards and content is much more broad in the good side, and the bad side is lackluster and weak. You get cut out from so much content and potential side quests, which makes it not worth it. Larian and most players expect people to play the good side in the first playthrough, including myself, which I did the same, but I want to experience the evil side too. And I can say I was disappointed, so if you play as an evil character, keep in mind you will not experience much of a difference, and there will also be less things for you to see. So next time make both evil and good appealing, which player will appreciate. This video is starting to get too long, and I think I've gotten all my major complaints I wanted to mention, so this is just some quick ones that I would like to also mention, but it is not as important for me. I would like it Larian didn't cap it at level 12, but I understand the decision to do so. But at the end game, could you at least slow down the leveling after reaching 10, since reaching 12 in Act 3 was too fast. Even if you were just level 10, most bosses would be able to defeat anyway with no problem. The game did have some weird writing that didn't really add up or make any sense. This one would be a video for itself because how much that can be said here, but one thing I can mention is that Karlach's story doesn't really make that much sense. I really like her character, she's one of my favorites, but her entire story is just, excuse me, what? XP to level 3 did a good video about this. There are more to the writing, but as I said, it would be a video for itself, since there is just so much to it. The playable races in the game are quite unbalanced, some are overpowered and some are weak. I just think there could have been more balance to the races. There is not much I can say here really, and I can't really think of anything else to say really, so I will just end with that I really like Baldur's Gate 3, but I just can't help ignoring the obvious flaws about this game. Other than that, I really recommend you play the game. Trust me, you will appreciate the game even if it is not for you. So I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.